Pressure continues to mount on Israel's prime minister to secure a ceasefire in Gaza and bring hostages home. Emotions are running high in the country after the bodies of 6 hostages who had recently been killed by Hamas were retrieved from the enclave on Sunday. Now, when the US president was asked if Benjamin Netanyahu was doing enough to secure the release of hostages, Biden simply responded no. Britain's defence secretary, meanwhile, has come out to justify London suspending certain arms export licences to Israel.
There's no blanket ban. There's no arms embargo. This is a question item by item, licence by licence. Is there a risk, and this is the process we're obliged to follow, is there a clear risk that its use in Gaza could be linked to violations of international humanitarian law? And that was the conclusion of the process. 30 out of around 350 export licenses have therefore been suspended with immediate effect.
We can now bring in our chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons. Rob, good afternoon. We'll talk about the international pressure on Israel later. But firstly, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is really digging in his heels. He spoke last night and he sort of justified his wanting to keep fighting for Israel's control of the Philadelphia corridor. And also he spoke in the face of domestic pressure that is mounting. He said, and I quote, "No one will preach to me on the issue," speaking of that he is more committed than anyone else to securing the release of the hostages. Yeah. He's not going to change course, is he?
No, he's quite clear he's not going to change course. He survived the political pressure that built up after Israeli soldiers had found 6 hostages dead in a tunnel beneath Rafah, apparently executed, shot in the head. There was an enormous outpouring of anger and grief in Israel that led to the demonstrations, led to the strike. But both the demonstrations and the strike sort of petered out a little bit. That is in large part because Israeli society itself is divided. It's divided on how to go to proceed. A good part of Israeli society supports the approach being taken by the government, that the priority should be to defeat Hamas. And Benjamin Netanyahu, I think, is able to use that. He apologized for the death of the hostages, not because he thought his strategy was wrong, but because the government hadn't been able to extricate them from the grasp of Hamas. The strategy, he says, is right. You mentioned the Philadelphia corridor, and many people are asking, why has he become so obsessed with the Philadelphia corridor? Back in May, when Joe Biden announced his plan, the 3-phase plan, which apparently originated from Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, at that point, never said anything about the Philadelphia corridor. It wasn't part of the plan. It's only subsequently that he raised the issue of the Philadelphia corridor, and it's become the sort of the key issue in whether or not there should be a ceasefire. Now he's saying, that the priorities, the 4 priorities for Israel are to defeat Hamas, to return the hostages, ensure Gaza does not pose a threat in the future, and return Israeli residents to the south. And of those 4, he said 3 pass through the Philadelphia corridor. In other words, there's no way under his leadership that Israel is going to allow the Philadelphia corridor to fall back into Hamas's hands, which means in turn, since Hamas has said that they cannot accept that the Philadelphia corridor will remain in Israel's hands, that the pathway to a ceasefire at the moment doesn't exist.
But it's unlikely that Egypt is going to accept that either.
No.
It won't.
No,
so we're back. We're back to square one.
We're back to square one.
Okay, let's talk about the international pressure, because yesterday, of course, now we have the London that has stopped the arms export licenses of 30 out of 350 arms it does send to Israel. Also, yesterday we had the U.S. President Joe Biden, who responded saying no, the Israeli Prime Minister is not doing enough to secure the release of hostages. The international pressure is mounting, but Benjamin Netanyahu remains defiant.
Yeah, I mean, it's problematic for Joe Biden, for the Democratic administration at the moment, because they're cautious about how far they can go in putting pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu with the elections in the US just around the corner. But
so just words and no deeds, essentially.
Well, we'll see, but it's very difficult for them to put really serious pressure on the Israeli government at the moment. But there was that meeting of the top leadership, Secretary of State, and also Jake Sullivan, who was also their national security advisor. And after that meeting, Joe Biden was asked by reporters, is Benjamin Netanyahu doing enough, in your opinion, to achieve a ceasefire? And he answered with just one word: no. He couldn't make it clearer than that. And the United States, apparently, according to the Washington Post, through Joe Biden, is preparing at the moment to sort of take it or leave it deal for Israel. But whether we should believe that or not, given the fact that the elections are just around the corner, and if Israel doesn't accept it, then the US is going to pull out of the search for a ceasefire deal. It seems unlikely at this stage. But to go back to the British decision to stop sending components to the Israeli military, it's a decision that's been taken after a 2-month procedure. It affects 30 out of 350 contracts. The UK doesn't send an awful lot of military equipment to Israel anyway, £42 million worth in 2022. But it sends a signal to the United States, because up until now, UK and US have been marching in step on this. Now the UK is pulling out and sort of exposing the US a bit. It puts pressure on the US to take similar action.
We'll see if this pressure tactics work. We'll see, because I mean the conflict is going to now enter its 11th month quite soon. Rob, thank you very much for that. Rob Parsons there.